Final Fantasy Tactics isn't just one of those games that people recommend. They'll walk up to you if you've played it and interrupt any conversation about Final Fantasy and be like, "But my child, you must experience the good news of the lost history of Ivalice." They'll tell you it's not just good, it's the best. It's chess with emotions. It's Game of Thrones if they actually finished the plot. It's job systems and trauma, alright? Dang. Chill. Look, I remember loving this game back in the day, despite the fact that I was destroyed by a chocobo when I first picked it up and didn't know what to do with that. And I felt a little bit confused about who was betraying who, but I still had a good time. But it's 2025, and we have the Ivalice Chronicles coming out, so I just had to revisit this one and test the nostalgia. You know how I be. So I busted out the old PSP, popped in War of the Lions, because we have to talk about what they're removing in the Ivalice Chronicles. Proceeded to break the game in the way it was always intended to be broken. And it didn't take long to realize that Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the most brilliant, busted, and gorgeous tactical RPGs I've ever played. And in War of the Lions, the frame rate in this sucker might just be held together by duct tape and ambition. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of retro games with a major dose of RPGs and nostalgia, then why don't you dual-wield fists and double punch that subscribe button into oblivion so it blows all the way across the planet because you enjoy the grind. And also don't forget to hit that like button and that notification bell. All right. Let's get into it. Final Fantasy Tactics was the result of a massive creative shift in the industry. A whole team of genre-defining minds jumping in from one tactical powerhouse to another. Yasumi Matsuno, the man behind Tactics Ogre, Ogre Battle, and eventually Vagrant Story, brought his dark, political, morally gray style over to Square in the mid-90s. And with him came a number of members from the old Quest team. Developers who weren't interested in saving crystals and kissing princesses. These folks wanted to write about war. War with real consequences. Kingdoms falling to corruption, friends betraying friends, gods meddling from the shadows. And Square, still fresh off the success of Final Fantasy VII, looked at this team and said, "Sick! Let's make a dark Final Fantasy with chocobos that are so cute but can also kill you!" And thus, Final Fantasy Tactics was born. This is a tactical RPG set in Ivalice. A world so detailed and full of drama, it might as well have had its own novel by release day. This game wasn't swords and spells for the sake of it. It was a generational conflict wrapped in theology and classism and betrayal and demons disguised as the good guys. When the game dropped in 1997 on the PS1, it instantly felt different from everything else in the Final Fantasy lineup. And it was. The tone was colder, the plot was sharper, the world felt lived in. You weren't playing as a chosen one, you were watching history unfold, and you just happened to be one of the few people trying to do the right thing inside of a world actively falling apart. The game was a masterclass, gorgeous pixel art, deep job systems, a soundtrack that still goes toe-to-toe with any JRPG out there. But the localization? Well, the localization was fun, esoteric even. Some of these have stuck around for fans of the original. Don't blame us, blame yourself and God. Animals have no God. If the penalty for crime is a fine, then that law only exists for the lower class. Some lines felt like a Shakespearean play translated by someone who forgot English halfway through.
This movie is good!
But, it gave the game a kind of charm, this sort of archaic, mysterious flavor that made it feel like you were peering into something ancient and weird. I discovered the original well after the PS2 came out. I had a PS2 Slim, and I had fallen headfirst into the world of Final Fantasy, as I've talked about in many other videos. Back when Walmart still had this, dusty little corner of budget bin greatness, and tucked away in that treasure trove was Final Fantasy Tactics. And when I saw this weird spin-off that kind of looked like a side project, but had the right words on the case, I was like, okay, I'll buy it. It says Final Fantasy, I see Square, how bad can it be? Yeah, and you remember that vision of a dark Final Fantasy with murderous chocobos? Yeah, within an hour, I was mauled by one. These things are supposed to be adorable yellow little birds, and I just got drop-kicked into the void. Oh, hey, Gilgamesh. This was my very first Tactics game, and it did not go well. I had no idea how positioning worked, no clue how the CT gauges functioned, and I was just angry. Not like rage quit mad, but this hurt my pride. Like, how dare you, Final Fantasy? I have overcome your crazy clown. I have slain Sephiroth until he decided to come back. I've danced on the moon because Zeromus asked for it, and this is how you treat me? But as all good redemption stories go, a hero stepped in. My buddy Steele. Now, if there was ever a walking JRPG encyclopedia, it was this dude. He introduced me to Star Ocean, Radiata Stories, Suikoden, Drakengard, and now he was dragging me back into Tactics. But this time, we decided to play it together. We played this like co-op style, where we would like pick characters and we would hand off the controller, passing turns like pros on a beach trip. That somehow included me getting stung by a jellyfish, because of course it did. And between the ocean dips and the trauma, I fell in love with Tactics. And DDR, but you know, the falling off the dance pad in front of a bunch of people in an arcade trauma is a story for another time. Fast forward to 2007, and Square Enix released War of the Lions on the PSP. Now, how I got the PSP is a story that I've told on the Level Up Legacy podcast that I run with Slam Zany. Go check that out if you haven't seen it already. Anyway, War of the Lions took everything people loved about the original and added a fresh coat of paint. It was a completely retranslated script, now full-on Shakespearean fantasy drama. There was these awesome anime cutscenes for key moments, there was voice acting for the big story beats, 2 new job classes, guest characters like Balthier from Final Fantasy XII with Barrage. This dude was broken. I'll get there. And a painful slowdown during spells and abilities because PSP? Now, at the time, this felt like the definitive version of this game. But over time, it became clear that War of the Lions wasn't really the original version. Those anime cutscenes, cool as they were, kind of compressed the story. The rewritten dialogue, while more elegant, softened some of the edge and the ambiguity. The pacing changed, the tone shifted a little bit. The filler was just enough to start making it feel a little bit like a different experience. Even Matsuno, when reflecting on it, noted that the remake made some changes he never really intended. Voice acting, while powerful, required a tighter script, new scenes were added, but these old dynamics were kind of lost. The heart was still there, but the texture had changed. But regardless, you know I was on that day one. Steele and I built our insane monster characters in the back row of a band class like the true degenerates we were. PSPs tucked behind sheet music stands, plotting combos and whispering to each other when there were characters that were betraying us while we were supposed to be playing music. Mac, our music teacher, would sort of give us the eye, but he didn't really know what was going on. Sorry, Mac. And then right before the end, I saved over the final map. The wrong file, couldn't go back, couldn't finish, couldn't do multiplayer. It was a tragic end, but I still loved it. Because this game kind of burrowed deep in my bones. Which brings us to now. Ivalice Chronicles, the upcoming remaster, is built from the ground up. Not from War of the Lions, but from the original PS1 version. Not because War of the Lions was bad, but because the team, Matsuno included, wanted to preserve the original soul of the game. The tone, the jagged elegance that made Final Fantasy Tactics feel like nothing else before or after. So, you may be asking why I'm going back to War of the Lions, and it's simple. It's where the story really started for me, and I wanted to see those differences in real time to figure out if the remaster is going to feel like the vision fulfilled, or if it feels like we lost something. Hello everyone, future Brandon here, not to be mistaken for modern Brandon.
My take on modern.
Listen, Square Enix actually gave me a code to play the Ivalice Chronicles early, and I didn't expect this at all. Hence, making this video. So watch this one. It's still super interesting, but I got a lot more to come on the Ivalice Chronicles specifically. So I dove back into this roughly 50-hour masterpiece, and this was my experience. There's something about booting up War of the Lions again that just feels right. That opening cutscene, oh man, you could just feel the tension, and then that music kicks in, and you're immediately back into it. I already knew this isn't your standard Final Fantasy story. This is your war, theology, class divide, betrayal, and you still get chocobos. Some of them good, and some of them murderous monsters that I was prepared for this time. After that first battle where things start off kind of crazy, you get dropped into that Garland Magic City fight. And if you've never played this game before, this might give you the impression that this game will be absolutely brutal. Because this map isn't easy for a first go at it. From the jump, you're handed 4 random generic characters, some squires, chemists, and none of them have names that really matter. Well, until they do. Because I kept all my little newbies alive after that battle, and after some grinding, old Brigard, Burnden, Valentine with a Y, and Lavian became my most trusted of homies. Yes, these are my people now. And this time, I didn't go in blind. I had a plan. First, I started out by grinding that Squire class to get the JP up and move +1 abilities. Made sure every character could throw rocks, heal with potions, and beat someone up with a staff every turn. Because grinding in this game isn't really like grinding in other JRPGs. In a standard Final Fantasy, you run around, you take out each battle, you get your experience and your gold, rinse and repeat. And in most of the remasters, you can speed this up considerably. So, Square gets it. But in Tactics, you're not trying to win early extra battles right away. You're trying to maximize each individual turn. Every swing, every time you throw a stone, every basic spell, it's just free job points and experience. And if you're not grinding in Mandelia Plains after a story battle, what are you even doing? You're dying. That's what you're doing. Never again will I lose to a chocobo. Now, what the game doesn't really make clear that I had to remember by poking around is that your male characters will generally have higher physical stats, and your female characters work better with magical jobs. And like a good slave driver dedicated to the power of my team, I had the women beat the men to get stronger. They healed them after they beat them, of course. I'm not a monster. I also found that, torturing chocobos by cornering them, beating them up, and letting them heal themselves was a great way to gain experience and job points. What? Alright, setting aside the fact that the true genius of Matsuno was making me the demon in the shadows, it wasn't long before I started to completely break this game in the best way. It's good to have some variety, but early on, getting some of the essential skills for the beginner jobs, and then working through monk, archer, etc. to unlock the ninja makes it so that you can build one of the most broken combos right out the gate. And in taking so long to do so, I may or may not have gained so much cash that I could basically just upgrade equipment whenever I needed to. The benefits of grinding. When I got to Swiggy Woods, the game starts layering in more vertical terrain and goblins, but I wasn't gonna be humbled like I was back in the day. Not this time. This time, I move like a general. Wait on a hill, bait the little goblins forward, then swarm. Just like we learned with our totally not monstrous leveling tactics. Look, this is war, okay? And by the time I hit Dorter Trade City, it was on. That map can be brutal if you rush. Archers on the roofs, mages spamming spells from safety, but when you have yoked monk ninjas with some insane mages to back them up, you just reposition, let enemies waste their actions, and move in ready to dual-wield fist and aura blast enemies straight into the 4th dimension. Okay, maybe I needed to heal a few times, but we got him! I'm telling you, once that dual wield unlocks, the game opens up like an old school cheat code. You're hitting twice, dealing insane amounts of damage, the comboing with reaction skills like counter and first strike. Yeah, Brigard and Valentine with a Y were epic, but Ramza with fists? It's not even fair. Now there's one thing I'll say about getting characters this crazy, this early, and that is that the random battles have the enemies scale up with me. And they scaled up to Ramza, which on one hand can be great when others take them out and get the benefits, but eventually you could recruit characters that you want in your party, like Agrius or even Cloud, or my beloved Balthier in War of the Lions. But you'll find that they're simultaneously not that good compared to your beastly generic team, and much harder to keep alive for those future grinding sessions. Anyway, I did find some jank. Magic casting can still tank the frame rate into single digits. Summons like Ifrit or Shiva turn into a PowerPoint presentation, but honestly, I didn't care. The rhythm of the battle, the crunch of menus, the satisfaction of seeing job points gained pretty much every turn, it still hits like I expected. This job system is legendary, better than most modern RPGs even today. There's freedom, strategy, creativity. You can mix and match in ways that feel absurdly broken, and it's encouraged. Want a geomancer with black magic? Do it. You want a knight with white magic and auto potion? You're a monster, but I respect it. Just about every class combination can be viable, and there are so many permutations of both classes and skills. And one of the best things is that every map can feel like a puzzle with like a dozen different solutions. You don't just win, you win on your terms. So yeah, War of the Lions is a little bit crusty, and the UI is a bit dated, and the animations stutter, but in those first few hours, I'm already knee-deep in class planning, spreadsheets, and cackling as my team levels up and burns the world to the ground. Saves the world. This is Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's still unmatched. And one thing that surprised me as I dove back into this world is just how much I cared about these characters. Not just the story arcs, which we'll get to, but like my squad, like the story characters you can recruit, and even some of the villains. There's so much depth, even for some of these side characters. It's just so good. Like, if you ever had one of those things that you love, you like talk it up, and then you go back and you realize it's exactly as good as you remember. It's like Sidecar Donuts in Costa Mesa in California. Like, shout outs to those guys. Tactics is like Sidecar Donuts. Agrias, for example, is still one of my favorite characters in any Final Fantasy game. She's tough, she's loyal, she's noble without being a butthead about it, and her holy sword skills are sick. I mean, after I took the time to get her caught up to Burnden, of course. And at some point, I had to do the unthinkable. I had to bench Burnden to make room for Agrias. Look, you did good, Burnden. It's just, you know, you can enjoy the warmth of the bench now and not get inevitably slaughtered on the battlefield. You deserve it. No, don't ask why Brigard is still in the team. I'm not playing favorites. Look, Brigard's just got that dog in him, you know? Like, no, don't leave, Burnden. And then there's Delita, or Delita. I still don't know how to say his name. Hey, future Brandon here again. First of all, forgive Retro Brandon for his ridiculous pronunciations of these games, because the Ivalice Chronicles made it very clear how to pronounce these names. It is Delita. But second, I just have to say, the Ivalice Chronicles makes the story so accessible with the voice acting and some of the chronicles that they have in there, and the story and the characters have never felt more approachable in this version. So keep an eye out for that next video, because I definitely want to talk about that way more. And I gotta say, the older I got, the more his arc is so interesting. When you're young, you sort of see him as a traitor, and when you're older, you realize he's just kind of playing the game that he thinks he needs to play. He's not trying to be the hero necessarily, he's kind of trying to survive a system designed to chew people up, spit them out, and stomp on them. Ramza, for his part, is still just out there trying to do the right thing in a world full of liars and monsters. He starts out thinking he's in a classic Final Fantasy story, and then chapter 1 hits and it's like, oh no, buddy, this is a Matsuno story. So here's some dead kids and political conspiracies, the likes of which you could have never imagined. And that guy over there, yeah, he's probably a monster. Good luck. But even among all this narrative drama, you still get the Final Fantasy flavor, not least with some of these guest characters. Like Cloud! Yes, that Cloud! And yes, it was very cool to unlock him again. First time I played the game, I was like, what? And of course, getting Cloud in the party, it's super easy. You just make sure Mustadio's not dead, go to GOG and watch a scene, then read a rumor in Golan, then travel to Lysilia, then bring Beowulf back to Golan to fight through an entire dungeon's worth of monsters until he joins. Cool, now you've got Beowulf. Next, you keep going to protect a dragon. Surprise, the dragon's real name is Reese. She's now yours. Good job. But not fully yours, because you have to return to GOG, watch another cutscene, Construct 8 shows up. He's a robot. He joins. Why not? And now remember Reese? Yeah, she's a dragon. But you go buy a flower from a flower girl at Salgidos. Yes, totally not Aerith, by the way. No, I'm not kidding. Oh, and you could totally miss all of this. And then you go back to GOG again, then you go to Zeltenia, and then you listen to a rumor about a cursed island, and this opens up a secret battlefield. And then you go there, you beat it, you get a Zodiac Stone. Now you try to move on the map, and bam! Reese turns back into a human. Congrats! And then you go back to GOG one last time, and you use a Zodiac Stone to summon Cloud, and then he falls out of the sky. Ha ha! Get it? Cloud, he falls out. Anyway, he has amnesia for no excusable reason, and then he immediately runs away. And then you chase him to Zeltenia, where you fight alongside him as a guest, and then when the battle ends, he joins your party. And then you have Cloud. Super, super easy. Yeah. Did you get all that? I hope so. Man, I really hope they make this one just a little bit more straightforward in the remaster. Oh, and he's level 1 when you get him. So, yeah, but in War of the Lions, he can at least be recruited earlier than the original. So, totally worth it? Now, by the time I recruited Cloud, my team was fully optimized. Brigard had become a god-punching ninja monk. Valentine with a Y was shooting magic out of 3 different orifices. And Cloud was just kind of standing there hey, does anyone need a limit break? Oh, my dear boy. No, we don't. You're made of cardboard and dreams. Now, in fairness, you can build him from scratch and pump his stats and make him an absolute monster, just like most characters, and that limit break is pretty cool. But also, I just needed to read a rumor and do this one side quest to get Balthier. And let's be honest, Balthier is the most broken character in War of the Lions. This is one character I am dearly going to miss in the new remaster because he's exclusive to War of the Lions, and I don't know, I hope the team at Square has some other characters up their sleeve because this dude walks onto the field, pulls out this whole like leading man shtick, as Balthier does of course, and then starts with the exclusive Sky Pirate job where he has Barrage. And you know what that means, don't you? After a series of beating up all of my other characters that I love very much, of course, and this is for their good as much as it is for his, he can get dual wield, knight swords, and then barrage to completely destroy the game by hitting everybody 8 times in one turn. The beatings were totally worth it. I'm fine. You're fine. Everything's fine. You can also get Luso from Tactics A2, on the other hand, and he's kind of another War of the Lions exclusive that's, pretty good. He's fine, friendly, easy to work with, kind of naive and doesn't really pose much of a threat. He's a nice kid, and, he doesn't really change the game. And I can't not talk about Cid, of course. Every Final Fantasy has a Cid, and Final Fantasy 16 Cid may be one of my favorite, but, this Cid is up there. This Cid is epic. Orlando. Not gonna lie, for some reason, I always thought of him as like Orlando Bloom, because of Lord of the Rings and pirates back in the day, whatever. And the reason I made that connection is because he gives you sort of this serious like Lord of the Rings Dunedain vibes. The Ivalice Chronicles makes me look like such a fool with the way I'm pronouncing these names. When this man joins the party, it's like someone kind of hands you the win the game button. He's got these sword skills for multiple classes, massive stats, and like no weaknesses. Adding him to the party felt so busted that I felt kind of bad using him. I mean, not really, of course. Walking in with Ramza, Egrius, Cid, Balthier among the rest of my crew felt like showing up with the Avengers. And yet, even with all of these incredible guest characters and busted options, the heart of my original homies still beats strong. My weird little Day 1 Squire squad, they had stories. Not scripted ones, personal ones. Burnden was my first to land a counter. Lavian saved my whole team with a clutch potion. Brigard destroyed all the things eventually. But until then, he survived like 7 fights with 1 HP, and now I think he's immortal. And that's kind of what Tactics does. It makes even your little filler characters feel like there's this folklore. There were these characters in history that were lost. And the drama, the betrayal, the punchlines, the poetry, the beating of men, it all still works. It's wrapped up in pixels and preserved like an ancient spellbook full of busted gunmen and holy knights who deserve better than my cruel party rotations. And by now, I've already gone on about all of the grinding of JP and the breaking of the system and the retraining my generics into demigods, but let's actually talk about why the combat system works so well. Because the genius of Tactics isn't just the jobs, it's the way those jobs interact with the terrain, the turn order, and the team composition. And how the game actively tests your mastery with some of the most devious map designs in the genre. Every battle is a layered puzzle box, but it's not like Fire Emblem where you can just keep pressing forward and expect a clean win. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Fire Emblem. But Tactics throws a bunch of archers on rooftops and they get the high ground and then they rain death on you while your squires are trying to figure out how stairs work. Like the Z-Klaus desert map, It's basically this long horizontal alley with barely any elevation. And it seems simple at first, until you realize that the enemy has this literal death funnel set up, and your party's movement range is like dog water, unless you prepped with move +1 and ignore height or teleport or something like that. Otherwise, you're taking this slow walk of shame through open fire. Or like the Goland execution site, where it's like this vertical nightmare with your squad at the bottom of a cliff and archers up top having the time of their lives. If you don't have any ranged options or like dragoons or something to jump, you're gonna get kicked around like a training dummy in Radiata stories. And that's not even to mention battles like the Gafgarian boss fight, where there's this infamous difficulty spike and you have basically Ramza in a one-on-one fight with an extremely powerful character while the rest of your characters need to go figure out what to do. Hope you have some good pre-fight save management, because otherwise you may see your save just go down the toilet. But War of the Lions doesn't just give you the ability to break things with a dual-wielding fisted monk. There was even more tools given to completely demolish everything in style. Specifically, the Dark Knight job, which we will also not be seeing in the Ivalice Chronicles. This isn't just some edgy name slapped on a damage dealer. This class was ridiculous. You get the Abyssal Blade skill that does AoE damage and heals the user. Their stats are off the charts. And you don't unlock it by accident. You earn it by leveling multiple physical jobs and straight up committing war crimes. But once you get this is just another avenue for just completely breaking the game. You can give Dark Knight teleport and vehemence, and suddenly you're just watching your enemies disappear like they were never coded into the game to begin with. In addition to that, you had another exclusive in War of the Lions called the Onion Knight, and this one is kind of more of a flex. It can only equip gear, and if you've mastered other jobs, Onion Knight becomes like this uber stat monster. You can equip everything, you can absorb damage like a sponge, and swing whatever ridiculous sword you want. It's not always optimal, but it can be hilarious to drop one in your party and just watch enemies cry. Why am I getting destroyed by the stupidest class name I've ever heard? War of the Lions also helps smooth out some of the flow with quicker menu, more job slots, and the ability to grind smarter, not harder. Once you throw on that JP boost, you can sort of park your party on maps like Mandelia Plains and then just basically run job drills like it's a medieval training montage. And here's the part I love. No matter how strong you get, the game still finds a way to challenge you. Totally love that. Love it. Don't hate it at all. Love it. Yep. Love it. Enemy AI will focus fire your healer. They'll target your squishies with perfect geometry. They'll run up, totally steal your armor, laugh, and run away. Absolutely love it. It's a great experience. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. You can build the most OP squad on the planet, but if your formation's trash, if you forgot to check turn order, if you didn't account for verticality, you might be in trouble. And honestly, joking aside, this is where the combat sings. It's not just about power, it's also about prep. Having Ramza rock shout, dual swords, and haste means nothing if he's standing in a corner while your team gets focus fired by black mages with AoE death spells. But once you figure it out, you know, your OP team can be over there dancing across rooftops, intercepting mages, juggling turn order like pros, and reacting with perfectly timed counters. It's like a tactical ballet. Very violent ballet. But all of that to say, the combat system still stands tall in this game, and I'm very excited to see what they do in Ivalice Chronicles. Because it rewards planning, creativity, and just the right amount of cruelty and madness. But even when you're outside of battles, the atmosphere and the exploration of this game are so interesting. This game kind of like leans in and whispers, everything about this world, everything is a lie. And not in like a you were dead the whole time kind of twist way, but like the winners rewrote history and now you're watching it unravel as you sort of figure things out. This game is a lost chronicle half buried in political spin and religious cover-ups, and the atmosphere sells it from the get-go. The world map may seem like it's just dots and lines, simple and clean. Simple and clean is the way that you're making me feel tonight. Sorry, I have no idea where that came from. But those little dots carry a lot more world building and depth than you'd think. You'll be walking from one town to the next thinking, I'll just shop for new gear real quick, and suddenly, bam, there's a random battle. You get your goblins, your archers, your panthers with a grudge, chocobos that the winners that are telling the story want you to believe were friendly and cute, but will murder you. Tactics is out here telling you what's real about Final Fantasy. Ivalice is that kind of place. You're not exploring for treasure, you're exploring to survive. And even when you reach safety, the game doesn't really let you relax. You don't get to stroll around towns and chat with NPCs like other Final Fantasies. Instead, you get menus and rumors, and it all comes together and totally works. In the tavern, you read vague whispers about political shifts and strange creatures, and maybe something about a cursed island that definitely won't lead you to a whole side plot about time travel and dragon girlfriends. Totally casual. And then there's these propositions, which honestly deserve their own spin-off series, because you get to send your characters like Burnden and Burgard and Lavian off to secure trade routes and negotiate guild disputes. And half of the time they come back rich, and the other half, nothing. Not even a sorry. Even outside of the story beats, the world just feels alive. The shops update with the war effort, inventory changes depending on where you are in the narrative. Sometimes just reading one of those rumors unlocks an entirely new map location. The game rewards curiosity. Even the music kind of reinforces it and gives you this vibe. And if you're particularly insightful, you might realize that Tactics stole the entire soundtrack from Final Fantasy XII. Wait. And that's what separates Ivalice from a lot of other strategy RPG settings. It's how intentional everything feels. This isn't just fantasy land with swords. This is a place with an economy, with class divisions, with religious power plays and war-torn provinces. It feels like a world that would exist without you. You're not here to shape it, you're here to uncover the mystery. Because like where most RPGs start with destiny and end with fireworks and a hopeful future. Except you, Final Fantasy X, why did you do that to my heart? Final Fantasy Tactics begins in the ashes of a kingdom and asks you to join it on this archaeological dig to unearth the lost truth of the kingdom of Ivalice. The history that wasn't told by the victors. Every chapter peels back a new layer, not just the plot, but the world's morality, and the deeper you go, the worse it gets. Not because the story's bad, but because the truth is heavy. Most games have this rising actions, but Tactics has this like descent into madness. It doesn't just impress you with its plot twists, it's showing you the malleability of history storytelling. It makes you question the reliability of history and shows that bias impacts everything. And as a side note here, that's what makes me a little bit less enthusiastic about the stories of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance and A2. Look, these games are super fun and they are super addicting. I love them for what they are, and I'll probably talk about them in some video at some point or another. But story-wise, it doesn't actually feel like we ever got a follow-up to Final Fantasy Tactics. Like, not really. But the point is, this game stands out as one of the most unique stories in the entire Final Fantasy franchise, let alone other Tactics games. All right, I'm back. Listen, I was gonna talk about the story in this video here. I had an entire section on it with some hilarious jokes, but I've decided to cut it out and move some of that stuff over to the Ivalice Chronicles. I mentioned earlier that the story is so much more accessible in the remake, and there's so many layers to this. I've never been so blown away by this game, even though I've played it several times. So I'm just gonna throw this out here now. The Ivalice Chronicles is amazing, and we are gonna talk way more about that in my next video. So with all that said, do I still think Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions holds up? 100 billion%. This game is still an absolute masterpiece. Sure, there are some bumpy difficulty spikes and frame rate hiccups that make it look like summons were being rendered on a toaster. But if you've been paying attention, you'll know that these are features, not bugs, right? Okay, maybe not, but still. There are so many ways to break this game, it is honestly hilarious. But like, you don't need to be like me. You don't need to grind for 10 hours on the level down trap to maximize your stats. You don't need to make Ramza a ninja monk demigod or turn Balthier into a one-man Lucavi eraser. But I mean, like, if you do, respect. You just need to know what classes synergize well and strategize. And going back to War of the Lions before the Ivalice Chronicles was a great idea. Did it make me mad that the new version isn't going to have all the extra classes and the characters from the PSP game? Honestly, not really. Would I love a surprise Cloud upgrade to make him insane? Of course. Would I scream if they added Clive from 16 or, I don't know, Gilgamesh for the Chaos? Totally. But am I going to be bitter about a new version that doesn't include Balthier or a Dark Knight? I mean, maybe a little with Balthier, because, I mean, like, he was so incredible. But ultimately, what the Ivalice Chronicles is shaping up to be is a refined retelling of the original vision, led by the Master Matsuno himself. And that is so exciting in its own right. Like, we're getting a fully voiced, re-scripted campaign by Matsuno, brand new narrative moments in dialogue, top-down tactical views, battle withdrawals, multiple difficulty modes. We're getting a streamlined class system with visible job paths, finally. And we're getting a return to the raw, jagged soul of the original 1997 version. This new version is going to hit different, and that difference is part of what makes it so exciting. because now I know what to expect in terms of flow and challenge for the most part, but I also know that my approach, my strategy, my party composition, it's gonna all have to change. It'll be familiar, but not the same. R.I.P. Balthier, you were just a beautiful, misunderstood sky pirate, and you were so broken in every possible way. I'll miss you. But if you've never played this game before, if you've only heard whispers about Ivalice from those creepy people who have played them before like myself, please, I'm begging you, play this game. Don't miss this one. And who knows, maybe we'll see an actual continuation of a Matsuno Tactics game, because that's kind of what we're missing. And also Square Enix, like seriously, the keycard situation, like you gotta stop that. I want to play this on the Switch too. This game is a 10 out of 10 for me, not just as a Final Fantasy fan, but as a lover of dark, complex, unforgettable fantasy worlds. This is a story that doesn't just challenge your mind with grid-based combat, it asks you to question what you know and how you act and where you stand. And decide for yourself what kind of legacy you're gonna leave behind. And if you want to see the mistakes that I've made for the kind of legacy I'm leaving behind, then go ahead and watch these videos next. Wow, what an outro. See ya.